I was so nervous the first time that my teacher asked me to improvise. I played the most boring, mumbly solo phrase that you can imagine. My rhythm was awkward and out of time. The notes only sorta resembled the changes. And now I get to watch my own students go through this, and every time I see them freeze up, I get this flashback to my own experiences. But in just a few lessons together, we're able to put together some pretty cool lines, and we're able to play through a whole solo with some simple beginner techniques. And in this video, I'm going to lay that same groundwork for you. I'm going to share my step-by-step soloing approach with exercises you can start practicing right away. And one of the most important keys to playing a good solo is that even if there's no instrument behind you comping the changes, the solo line should be constructed in a way that it implies what the chord changes are underneath it. Let's say I play a solo line like this. Right, I'm not playing any chords, but just by the nature of which notes I pick and specifically where in the rhythm I put them, you can kind of hear these chords underneath it, right? It's a 2-5-1 in the key of C. So in order to know what pitches that we can play, we need to kind of know what our tonal center is at any given time. So this is our first skill, is to be able to look at a lead sheet and be able to determine what scale belongs with what chords. At the most basic level, you can play just about any standard you want with only two scales, the major scale and the harmonic minor scale. Now, there's a lot of opportunities for us in the future to do much more colorful things than that, but since we're starting at the ground level, let's just start with those two things. So what we're going to do, I'm going to look at this tune. It could happen to you, and you can download this sheet. There's a PDF in the description underneath it. And let's just look at these chords. We're in the key of C. And so here in the key of C, our one chord is C. We're going to play a C major scale right here. Now, when we get to the E half diminished to A7, you might recognize this as a 2-5 in the key of D minor. And so for all of this, we're going to play a D minor scale, right? D minor. When we get to this one, F sharp, B7, this is a 2-5 in the key of E, E minor specifically. So we would play an E minor scale here. Then for a brief moment, we're back here in C, but not for long. This G minor to C7 belongs in the key of F. So we would play F major here. We could get into things like modes later on, but we're not even going to go there right now. All we're going to think right now is what is the tonal center of this section that we're playing, and we're going to play the scale that belongs to that. So here in It Could Happen to You, our first measure is C6. So we're going to play C major. Any of the notes of C major, any of those white notes work fine. Now when we go to the next two measures, E half diminished, A7 to D minor, all three of these chords belong to the key of D minor, so we're going to play a D harmonic minor scale. Our next measure, F sharp half diminished to B7. This is a 2-5 in the key of E minor. So just like we did with D, we're going to play an E harmonic minor scale. Okay, and now we land here in C6, so we're playing C major again. Now this only lasts for a second because this G minor to C7 to F, all those notes belong to the key of F major. So we're going to play an F major scale here. For us to really understand these tonal centers, we have to be able to play scale lines over the whole thing with good time. So what I like to do is play just continuous eighth note lines starting on the first measure, and when the chords change, we change the scale to match it. At this point, we're not really worried about which notes are the chord tones and which ones aren't. We're just going to make sure that we're playing the right scale over the right chord. Don't be afraid to go super slow at this. Tempo doesn't matter. What matters is the precision, that you pick the right scales, you switch at the right time, and you only play the right notes. Keep that eighth note line going. we have said that we want the solo lines we're playing to outline the chord changes. The way that we do that is we think about where are the strong beats of the measure, specifically beat 1 and beat 3, although I would count 2 and 4 as pretty strong beats also. And as much as possible, when those strong beats come, we want to be playing a chord tone, and that's kind of how we imply what the chords are to our listener. So our exercise here is we need to take the scale running exercise that we've been doing and now not just pay attention to what scale are we playing at any time, but we really have to remember which chord specifically are we playing, because we want to make sure that we're lining up those chord tones on the beat. So let's look at our example here again. So here, and it could happen to you, we take our C6 chord, let's pick a chord tone to put right on the beat. Let's say E, that's the third of our chord. And let's do something really easy. Okay, so I've got E on beat 1, G on beat 2, E on beat 3, G on beat 4. This is not the most sexy line of all time. Okay, now when we get to the next chord is our E half diminished chord. Now we said we we're going to play the D harmonic minor scale. We want to start on a chord tone of E half diminished. So where did we end? Our C? So we want to look at what notes belong to E half diminished. So maybe we'll pick this B flat. Now here, when I went to the A chord, I played an E. So notice I skipped over the D. Why did I skip over the D? Because the D is not a strong note in A7. The E is a strong note. It's the fifth. So I skipped right to it. If I don't do that, it's not a bad line necessarily, but it doesn't imply the chord changes nearly as well, right? And then I came right down the scale, still playing D harmonic minor. And now it's gonna land on beat 1, that A right on the D minor 7 chord, which is the 5th. That's great, it's a chord tone. It's kind of a cool line when you put a little swing to it. Not bad at all. So this opens our eyes to a really important idea, which is that we have the idea of a target note, right? Like where we're headed, what we're aiming for. And we know right now, at least, our target notes are going to be chord tones that try to land on one of those strong beats. So I want you to think about the target notes as being like our destination and everything else as being the journey to get there. So actually, a lot of the fun, a lot of the adventure in soloing comes from those in-between spaces. So one mistake that I hear my beginning students play all the time is they'll play the chord in their left hand and then their right hand will react to it by playing a solo line that fits whatever that chord is. And this could not be more backwards. The line is the journey that should be setting us up to land on our target. The target is the chord change, right? So we actually need to be thinking about the chord changes before they happen so that we can set up these lines that are going to land us there in time. So the first way that we could create that motion is just using scales. And this is the one we've been doing. Right, just coming right down the scale with every note right in sequence. So once we've got those scales down, another thing we should explore is to know what all the arpeggios are that are available to us for any of these scales. Take the notes of this scale, and I want you to explore every arpeggio that's within it. We're going to do 4-note arpeggios. The most common one that you may know already is you start on C, and we just go every other scale note up, right? So there's that one. But we also have one here, and here. Right, just using the notes of that scale, we just play one, skip one, play one, skip one, play one, skip one, we get an arpeggio. Let's do the same thing over the D harmonic minor scale. So we have D, play, skip one, play, skip one, play, skip one. Okay, then we have a really common mistake that I see from my beginning students is that they only use the arpeggios that contain the chord tones, right? So if they see C major 6, they're always going to kind of go for the C major arpeggio. They wouldn't play the D one. Now to remember, in this sense, the arpeggio does not necessarily have to be the chord tones. This is not classical music where we run like... Oh, it's been a while since I did that. Probably should do that more often. Play one, skip one, play one, skip one. Any notes from our scale are fine. We're on the journey. We don't have to worry about playing chord tones at this point. The target note that we're aiming for is going to be the chord tone, but we can use any of the different arpeggios that we want to get there. Another movement that we can do would be to take a leap, which just means anything larger than an arpeggio. I guess probably like a sixth or bigger is most common. So if we were playing a C chord, I want to land on this C. So I got this leap here from E to C. Now the trick to landing a leap is to make sure that you come back in the opposite direction. So if I leap up, my next movement is going to be coming back down. And the same thing is true if we do the opposite. If I do this big leap down an octave, I want to come up, kind of back up towards where I started. So another thing we could do would be actually to go outside of our scale and approach with chromatic notes. So check out why this is important. Let's play a D minor G7 line, a 2/5. If you notice this, over the D, we start on a strong note with the F, which is great. When we get to the G though, I've landed on an A and then an F. Those are not the strongest notes on a G7 chord. So we've got a little bit of a problem here in that we get to the B on the offbeat. What we need to do is somehow delay that B to land on the next beat instead. So we need an extra note in there somewhere. So in order to fix that, let's put a C sharp in here. And now that B lands right on the beat. Now we run into this problem a lot because our scale has 7 notes in it, right? And our measure has 8 eighth notes in it. So it's just natural that the scale is going to kind of fall in and out of sync as we play. So the way to solve that is actually to turn our 7-note scale into an 8-note scale, and then that kind of fixes the problem. Now this unlocks a whole skill tree called bebop scales that we're not going to go into today, but which you should hit the subscribe button for so you know the moment that I put that video out for you. So there is another option here, change our rhythm. So instead of playing straight eighth notes, we could insert a triplet, and that triplet will let us play 3 notes in the space of 2, therefore lining us back up. Now by doing this, our line has gotten shorter, right, by a note, and so we have to start the line later in order to land in the same place. Now learning how to play a jazz solo actually has a lot in common with us just speaking our native language. When we speak to our friends and family, our speaking has a rhythmic cadence to it, and we can use that rhythmic cadence to change the tone of what we're saying, right? Sometimes you want to be poetic and long and lyrical and with lots of enthusiasm and raises, highs and lows in your voices, and sometimes direct and to the point. It's so important for us to be able to take these rhythmic phrases that we speak naturally and to put them into our playing. Now, musically speaking, this means variety. So it means sometimes eighth notes, sometimes triplets. It means sometimes starting on the beat, sometimes starting off the beat, sometimes playing 4 notes, sometimes playing lines that are 10 or 12 notes. Sometimes it means staying in a relatively small area of the keyboard. Sometimes it means playing lines that expand 2 or more octaves. So our goal is to take this rhythmic phrase that we've been singing and to apply the notes that are available to us using our scales and our arpeggios and our leaps and all of that stuff from before. We need to put those 2 things together to create our solo line. Now to do this, we're going to rely on some old bebop tricks. When you hear John Coltrane or Charlie Parker or Bud Powell doing these crazy bebop lines, they're actually doing kind of just a little bit more advanced or maybe a little more virtuosic version of this same idea that we're talking about here. They've got target notes and they're on the journey to connect those target notes with fun rhythms and ideas. Our first trick here is a half-step approach. Now, this actually really helps us get a swing feel. If you think about the swing feel, ding, ding, ga, ding, ga, ding, ga, ding. The guz are where the swing is, right? That's the offbeats. And if we only really play lines that start with our target notes on the beat, it's harder for us to get that implied swing feel. So what we need to be able to do is start our lines off the beat. This little half-step approach is kind of like a hack to do that automatically. All right, let's say we wanted to play a line that was a C6 line and we put an E on the bottom. We could play something like this. We've put that E right on beat 1. If we want to get a swing feel to it, we need to put something on the off beat before it, on the end of 4. And so we can use this half-step approach. And automatically it's more swinging, right? In fact, you heard me do this in our line earlier. Right? Another bebopper trick is to use this thing called the enclosure, which means we're going to take our target note and we're going to surround it with notes from above and below it. Now in this case, I'm going to use a scale note above and that same half step below. And that gives us a 3-note enclosure. So that means we got 2 eighth notes before we land on our target note. So the enclosure is going to start a whole beat before your target note. There's all kinds of different enclosures you can play, chromatic enclosures, 3-note enclosures. Over the years, as you keep practicing this, you're going to encounter a bunch of other variations of this. So here I'm starting our enclosure at the beginning of the line, but we could do this anywhere in the line that we want to. Let's try one at the end. So let's look at this phrase from earlier, because this one solo phrase has several approach notes and enclosures in it, and I can show you kind of in real time what my brain is thinking about while I'm doing this. So first thing is I'm thinking about, I want to have an arpeggio up the D minor scale, and I want to syncopate it. So I'm going to put that half step before it. Okay, now at this point, I'm ending my time on D minor and I'm heading into G7. And so I'm thinking, I probably want the 3rd of G7 to be my chord tone, which is here. And I really want that to land on the beat. So at this point, I'm just kind of moving down the scale towards it. And now at this point, I realize like, oh, I'm going to get there a beat early or an 8th note early. So I need to do something to delay it. So I put this half step underneath it and then land on it. So it's got this enclosure actually to land on it there. Right on the good strong beat. Okay, now it continues up the arpeggio. And now at this point, I'm thinking I want to land on the E, the 3rd of the E chord. Okay, so again, I start coming down the scale, realizing, oh, I'm going to get there a beat earlier. So I need to jump and come at it from the bottom. And of course, I'm not literally thinking all of these steps while I'm soloing. That would be insane. I'm in like a flow state being creative, and this is happening intuitively, but this is kind of the best I could do to put words to what my intuition is doing. When it really comes down to it, this flow state is everything. So you and I, we're nerds. I know you own every jazz book ever published. I have them all back here too. I have binders full of worksheets from other places that I've collected, all the transcriptions I've done. I'm a total nerd. I have a Zettelkasten full of every jazz concept I've ever taught. It is not enough to stuff all this knowledge in your head and trust that you're going to be able to recall it and put it all together theoretically and logically when you're in the middle of trying to take a solo. That would be like trying to give a public speech while worrying about parts of speech and proper conjugation and I don't know, I'm terrible at grammar, but you know what I mean? Like, you got to take all that knowledge and you got to practice them and play them and drill them into you so they become part of your intuition, so that these things just flow out of you without any conscious thought. And that is when your ability to improvise will really start to take off. I would love to hold your hand as you go through this process. And to do that, go down under this video. In the description, there's a link to my 7-day soloing challenge. It's completely free. I send you a new 5-minute video every day with specifically what you need to practice. And then at the end of it, you're basically Charlie Parker. No, I can't promise that. At the end of that, you'll be a better improviser than you are now. And if you still want more help, you can come to my free Zoom workshops on Friday and we'll work through those together as a group. But don't wait until then, just watch this video right now and take the next step.